Psychological Alchemy, Part 3, The Way of Counter-Stimulation. This is the third in a series of videos describing my understanding of the work of George Gurdjieff and other influential thinkers and writers who have written about the nature of consciousness and perception. The first video focused on Gurdjieff's concept of non-identification and the first conscious shock. The second video is about Gurdjieff's concept of the second conscious shock. Links to these preceding videos can be found in the show notes below. It is recommended that they be viewed in sequential order. The nature of human consciousness is such that we can only coherently think of or focus upon one thing at a time. Edward de Bono conceptualized this characteristic as the area of activation, and Carlos Castaneda called it the assemblage point. Imagine a circle that could only contain one object at a time, which outside competitive forces with different agendas are trying to forcibly fill according to their own parochial interests. Whoever is strongest at any given time can jam his content through and fill the space. It's sort of like playing King of the Mountain. When something gets pushed in, what was there before gets pushed out. Another analogy is sumo wrestling, a form of competitive full-contact wrestling in Japan, where a rikishi, the Japanese word for wrestler, attempts to force his opponent out of a circular ring. What determines what content is occupying the circle? Emotions have a lot of strength, as do sensations like pain, hunger, fatigue, and physiological state. Past experience, conditioning, and associations also play a role. Your own volition can also place content. But most of the time, we are just passive and weak spectators who unconsciously identify with and assent to whatever is put there by outside mechanical forces, which we totally take for granted as being perfectly valid and appropriate to the situation at hand. To voluntarily try to dislodge existing content entails painful efforts on several fronts. For example, if you are feeling an acute or chronic pain, the default tendency is to yield to a passive contemplation of the sensation, along with the thoughts and feelings that accompany it. To direct one's attention to focus on something else entirely at that moment, such as making a complex movement, a candle flame, a memory, a scent, a sound, a visualization, a prayer, your breathing, etc., is like bench pressing 200 pounds. Or imagine a gigantic sumo wrestler in the middle of a small circle, and you have to push him out, and he does not want to go. How much effort would that take on your part? But that is the concept of counter-stimulation, when you are being tortured by pain, to deliberately fill the area of activation with totally different and unrelated content is a prodigious feat of will. You might focus on making some dance moves or sing a song to your best ability, or visualize an image, or put all your attention on your breathing. Since you can only perceive one thing at a time, when you endeavor to displace the painful sensation with something else, it is like changing the station on a radio or TV. Aside from the immediate benefit of taking your mind off the pain, there is the additional benefit of degrading the conditioned neurological response pattern. Pain can get wired in with time and repetition. When nerves get fired, they get wired. We want to break up such patterns and not reinforce them. In neurological terms, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So we deliberately try to fire off some other nerves so that new and different connections are made and reinforced. This causes the old connections to wither and die over time. For when something happens, it increases the probability it will happen again, and the reverse is also true. Another reason it is so difficult to dislodge the content that is automatically and mechanically filling your area of activation is that you may have to challenge or die to your own beliefs in order to displace the current occupant of your inner stage. You may have to sacrifice something that is precious at the moment. If your assemblage point is filled with a certain belief or view, it may be necessary to loosen its grip to come to a better and more accurate perception or understanding of a situation. This would entail an admission that your status quo view or opinion of which you are so enamored, or in other words, you could be wrong, misinformed, inappropriate, dumb, and by transference that you yourself are all of those things, which is a pill too bitter for most of us to take and swallow, especially if it would make us look bad in the eyes of others. These two efforts are why we are so mechanical. It is so hard to fill the area of activation with content that we voluntarily select. We not only have to sacrifice the belief that the current view has a valid lease on the property and every right to be there, and this is so hard to do, but then we also have to muster the willpower to kick out the current squatter, all when we are in our most unmotivated and weakest state. It is so much easier and less painful to coast down the line of least resistance by identifying and going along with what is mechanically and automatically filling our area of activation. Both inner and outer opponents always try to take advantage of the assemblage point by baiting us with distractions. They will distract us by filling our area of activation with content of their choosing, so that we lose a sharp awareness of essential objectives and take our eyes off the ball in any given situation. They will provoke a distraction called tsuki in Japanese, then strike and take our power, our health, or even our lives. What is tsuki? It is a samurai concept which connotes a lapse in awareness when we lose the sharp awareness of essential objectives necessary to fend off the onslaught of an opponent's attack. So don't be passive and vulnerable and get caught with your pants down. Be proactive and aggressive by filling the space with content of your choosing, rather than letting it be filled by dark, ignorant, misguided outside forces. And absolutely do this when you are under attack by some form of stress or resistance. When a demon whispers a suggestion in your ear, it does not mean that you have to act on it or believe in it or think that it has any credibility or validity. You really ought to regard yourself as a fool with foolish thoughts and inclinations that are not to be trusted. Have some humility. Don't become possessed. Don't fall under the spell of an ignorant demon. Here are some examples of counter-stimulation in action. Number 1, you feel famished with a strong inclination to gorge on something sweet, even though you just ate 2 hours ago. You counter-stimulate by going for a run, which kills your appetite once you get going. You also reframe the situation by reminding yourself that intermittent fasting is actually good for your health in multiple ways, and that going hungry for a while is not at all harmful. Another reframe you could use is that it is an opportunity to practice the second conscious shock described in the previous movie of this series. Number 2, you feel an attack of that chronic pain that's plagued you for years. You counter-stimulate by doing one or more of the following. A, visualizing the 20 smoldering pain processing areas in your brain being drenched down by ice water, putting out the now sputtering fire. B, listening to a podcast or music. C, practicing dancing or Tai Chi. D, having a massage. E, smelling peppermint. F, reading a book or watching a movie. G, stretching. H, yoga. I, praying for someone. J, focusing on your breathing. Number 3, you feel fatigue. If sleeping or resting is not possible due to circumstances, you take it as an opportunity to A, practice the second conscious shock described in the previous movie of this series. B, build your mental toughness by trying to perform well in spite of this resistance. C, make a super effort, which is really good for your being. D, counter-stimulate by focusing intensely on anything but the fatigue. Or E, counter-stimulate by focusing so intensely on the sensation of fatigue that it transforms into something else, a technique of Zen meditation. In summary, the idea behind counter-stimulation is that you don't have to passively accept what gets automatically served up to your awareness by life and your conditioning. It's hard, but you can take control and change the channel, the programming on that channel, and how you look at and feel about that content. It all depends upon the strength of your attention and your capacity to focus it consciously and voluntarily in another direction. This is a skill that can be learned by studying various meditative disciplines and creative thinking methods. But it should definitely not be abused, assuming you can develop sufficient skill and technique that would make you capable of such abuse. For example, acute pain is a sign that something is wrong with a body part, and you need to respect that to avoid compounding the injury. Another example is psychologically intrusive thoughts and feelings, which are really messages from your subconscious that need to be acknowledged, understood, and acted upon, not dismissed or ignored by counter-stimulation. In the case of chronic pain, however, it may be that the pain sensing system itself has become defective, as in the case of phantom limb pain, central post-stroke pain, fibromyalgia, and many other chronic pain syndromes. It is in this realm where counter-stimulation is more appropriate, and indeed may be a very effective long-term non-pharmacological remedy for the treatment of chronic pain. In the realm of acute pain or psychological stress, counter-stimulation may be very useful as a temporary emergency tool when pharmacology or therapy is not available.